As the death toll in Gaza surpasses 20,000, a UN vote on a possible ceasefire has been delayed again.
The air quality of Bosnian capital Sarajevo has been dubbed as very unhealthy by a company compiling data on air pollution. French President Emmanuel Macron has defended his divisive immigration bill, denying it spelt a shift to the far right.
At least 20,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed since Israel began relentlessly bombing the territory in retaliation to Hamas's 7th of October attack. On average, nearly 300 people have died per day since the start of the conflict, according to Gaza's health ministry, mostly women and children. Despite continued international pressure, a UN Secretary Council vote on a Gaza ceasefire resolution was again delayed by the US. The vote on the resolution drafted by the United Arab Emirates was initially scheduled for Monday. It has been repeatedly delayed in an effort to avoid a third US veto since the conflict began. Latest reports on the ground indicate intense street fighting in Khan Yunis, South Gaza. Israel's troops have released more footage of what the IDF claims is a vast tunnel network used by Hamas in Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister has again stressed that any stoppage in the hostilities would be temporary until Hamas is eliminated.
כל מחבלי החמאס, מהראשון עד האחרון, הם בני מוות. יש להם רק שתי אפשרויות, להיכנע או למות.
Meanwhile, the NGO Doctors Without Borders are concerned with Israel's continued restriction on humanitarian assistance into Gaza. The World Health Organization says a, quote, toxic mix of disease, hunger and lack of hygiene and sanitation is adding to the desperation of the people in Gaza.
Bosnia's capital, Sarajevo, has been intermittently engulfed in a toxic haze since the start of December. Its air quality is so bad it has ranked top on a list of the world's most polluted cities for 2 days in a row. The Swiss air technology company IQ Air compiles a real-time list of city air quality, rating from good to hazardous. On Wednesday, it put Sarajevo's air quality in the very unhealthy category. It's not a new problem. There have been protests by locals dating back to 2020. At the time, experts said air pollution in the Balkans was due in part to the use of coal-fueled power plants and old cars. Since then, the Sarajevo authorities have pledged to make the city carbon-free by 2035. But a cost of living crisis has forced people to rely on cheaper, dirtier fuels to heat their homes, and there's just no money to buy new cars. Many locals feel the need to wear masks when the pollution gets bad.
Maske, ja mislim se ne moraju nositi maske iz prostog razloga što je najopasniji dio aerozagađenja, a to je takozvana fina prašina, PM2,5 i PM1, bez problema prolazi svaku masku i ulazi u plućnu barijeru. Provija i plućnu barijeru i ulazi u krvotok. Dakle, imali mi, nemali masku.
Sarajevo has to do something, and the city has been included among 100 others the European Union is helping to reach net zero emissions. It's currently developing action and investment plans for climate neutrality across all sectors. French President Emmanuel Macron has defended his divisive immigration bill, denying it spelt a shift to the far right. The bill, which aims to toughen France's immigration policy, passed the lower house of Parliament late on Tuesday.
Nous continuons d'agir. Cette loi, je le disais, c'est pour moi le bouclier qui nous manquait. Et cette loi, il faut la regarder d'ailleurs avec son complément européen, qui est les décisions qui ont été prises ce matin par l'Europe, qui nous permettent de mieux protéger les frontières européennes, mieux enregistrer, améliorer la coopération entre nos polices.
Pacte immigration et asile.
Exactement, et permettre de raccompagner beaucoup plus rapidement et simplement les gens.
The law would restrict the right to legal residence, tighten the conditions for family reunification, and introduce immigration quotas for France. It passed the National Assembly with a majority of 163. It has created divisions in the government itself and amongst the French. Health Minister Aurélien Rousseau resigned on Wednesday in opposition to the bill.
J'ai l'impression qu'on attise le racisme.
Je pense que l'immigration enrichit un pays. Un droit, c'est un droit.
The bill also limits foreigners' access to social benefits. The Secours Catholique denounced the bill as creating an ideology of fear and threat and absolutely not a welcoming migration policy.
Rising living costs, scarce housing and rising prices are hitting German families hard. When the charity The Ark was founded almost 30 years ago, 1.2 million children face poverty in Germany. Despite a decrease in births, this number has tripled to more than 3 million since then.
Also man musste kein Visionär sein vor 10 Jahren, um zu wissen, wenn man die Armut nicht bekämpft, was passiert. Wir haben jetzt auch durch PISA nochmal bestätigt bekommen, dass die Bildung unserer Kinder ganz, ganz schlecht ist in Deutschland. 25% der Viertklässler können nicht richtig lesen, das ist erschreckend und das merken wir auch. Und das hat auch viel mit Geld zu tun.
Gerade ist für mich schwer. Ich habe vor 2 Monaten eine Krebsdiagnose bekommen und dadurch meinen Job nicht mehr ausüben können. Und dessen bin ich fast täglich hier, Mittagessen.
This year, homelessness levels across Germany increased significantly. The cold bus delivers homeless people to shelters and gives them warm food and sleeping bags.
Ich glaube, dass die Nachfrage größer als das Angebot ist. Also das erleben wir ja jeden Tag auf der Straße und dementsprechend ist das die Veränderung. Das kann man über die letzten Jahre sehr, sehr deutlich beobachten.
Official statistics say 57% of homeless people with German citizenship were forced onto the streets after terminations of flat contracts.
Die meisten sind nicht nett. Also die denken, naja, kick den letzten Penner da an. Ich war 30 Jahre Dachdecker. Ich bin 51. Horst ist 61. Ich war 20 Jahre bei der Polizei.
There are less than a handful of buses in Berlin equipped to bring people in wheelchairs to shelters, which can be especially hard during cold winter months.
Wir haben 16 Jahre lang die eine Regierung gehabt und jetzt seit 2 Jahren die andere. Wir merken einfach, der Unterschied ist nicht besonders groß, zumindest nicht in Bezug auf armutsbetroffene Menschen. Die Versuche sind da, aber die Umsetzung ist noch sehr schwach.
This week, this food bank packed over 10,000 bags for those in need over the Christmas season.
In Germany, for those living in poverty, it's not only about a lack of money, but it's also about the social exclusion. Liv Stroud in Berlin for Euronews.
Public television stations in Poland, such as TVP Info, stopped working on Wednesday. Donald Tusk's new government has sacked the governing bodies of public communication as a way of putting an end to the political control of the media. Many employees now face uncertainty.
Na pewno narażania na duży stres też ludzi, którzy po prostu chcą wykonywać swoją pracę, którzy też nie widzą powodu, żeby ulegać prawie siły, ponieważ to prawo powinno być tą siłą decydującą, a nie siłowe właśnie rozwiązania, które miałyby to prawo ominąć w jakiś sposób. Faktem jest, że sytuacja jest trudna, ludzie się starają wspierać, jedni to lepiej przeżywają, drudzy gorzej, ale też nie mamy powodu zgodzić się na to, żeby w sytuacji, w której nie ma prawnych podstaw do przejęcia nadawania TVP Info, po prostu na to pozwolić.
Protesters in support of TVP expressed their discontent by taking to the streets.
Bronić wspaniałej telewizji polskiej. Najlepszej jaka jest. Jak ta władza postępuje? W sposób chuligański przejmuje media, czyli co? Wolne słowo. No i jest to zamach stanu.
But many agree with the government and emphasize that TVP under the previous Law and Justice Party was not telling the truth.
Widzowie TVP Info i Wiadomości przez wiele lat byli manipulowani. Manipulacje zostały udowodnione i opisane przez wielu medioznawców i naukowców, a to, co TVP pokazywało, stało się przedmiotem chociażby wielu prac magisterskich czy nawet doktorskich w Polsce. Na konkretne przykłady wskazywał też przez lata Rzecznik Praw Obywatelskich.
Politicians from the government coalition strongly emphasize that the changes are positive and necessary.
Niezwykle dobra wiadomość. TVP przestało nadawać, przestało uprawiać propagandę i nienawiść. Możemy powiedzieć jasno, nie przejmujemy TVP, ale przywracamy TVP Polakom. To, co obiecaliśmy w wyborach 15 października.
The change in the management and the profile of the public media was no surprise. The ruling coalition has been announcing it for long. But the dispute between the two sides will certainly not end today. Magdalena Hodowny for Euronews from Warsaw.
The location of jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is still unknown 15 days after he went missing in a Russian jail. His team last week said he had suffered a, quote, serious health incident, which they believe was brought on by hunger. The Kremlin has not answered their inquiries. Navalny is serving a prison sentence on fraud charges and was sentenced to a further 19 years in a special regime colony on extremism charges in August. He insists the charges against him are political.
Yekaterina Duntsova formalized on Wednesday her candidacy for March 2024's Russian presidential elections. The candidate was chosen by a group of 521 people. Russian law requires at least 500 supporters if she is not backed by a party. Duntsova now needs to wait for validation by the Central Electoral Committee before moving on to the signature collection of 300,000 from across the country. If she manages to stand as independent in the Russian presidential race, the former journalist hopes to be a strong contender against Vladimir Putin, despite accusations of being a puppet ruler to legitimize this election. The Russian head of state has already complied with the required procedures and can begin collecting signatures on the way to his fifth term in office, which no one believes he'll lose.